If you're a Yu-Gi-Oh GX fan, Zane Truesdale is the epitome of a fantastic character. He is one of the most iconic machine monsters, was one of the strongest duelists in the academy, and nearly put his brother in a body bag, and many more things that made him lovable. What we don't like about him is making the Cyberdarks look runnable, as when they came to the Yu-Gi-Oh TCG, these machines didn't live up to the hype. As cool as randomly taking dragons from the graveyard to equip them sounds, forgetting not to make this archetype a clunky deck seemed to be an issue they wholly ignored. The bad news is that Cyberdarks may never be fixed. The good news is we can banish them in today's video of why these edgelord machines failed in the TCG. Cyberdark mainly focused on utilizing dragons and graveyards as equip cards. Later, it became what Konami usually does with the failed archetype, becoming an OTK based deck with the release of more support. The first sign we should have taken that this archetype would be bad news was that the TCG set was dedicated to them. Cyberdark Impact was released in November 3rd, 2006. The main deck monsters were all introduced. The three amigos were Cyberdark Horn, Edge, and Keel. These dragons that weren't dragons were all level 4 dark machines with 800 attack and defense, and if normal summoned, you could target a level 3 or lower dragon in your graveyard, equip it, and gain attack equal to that monster's attack. They also could save themselves and be destroyed by battle with the equipped monster instead. Edge could attack directly, but its attack would be halved during damage calculation if you used its effect. Horn inflicted piercing damage, and Keel could inflict 300 damage to your opponent when it destroyed a monster by battle. The boss that ties them all together is Cyberdark Dragon. This level 8 dark machine monster must be fusion summoned using each of the 3 Cyberdark monsters above in Horn, Edge, and Keel. When special summoned, it lets you grab a dragon monster from your graveyard, and it gains attack equal to that monster's attack. It also gained 100 attack for each monster in your graveyard. If it were destroyed in battle, you could destroy the equipped monster instead. What's cool about this is that the archetype even got a fusion spell, aptly named Cyberdark Impact, which came out in Tactical Evolution because who knows why. You can fusion summon Cyberdark Dragon by shuffling Horn, Edge, and Keel from hand, field, or graveyard into the deck as its fusion materials. There were a few good things to love about our little evil machines. They had a really powerful fusion spell that was very lenient on where you could fusion summon from, subsequently making it very easy to bring out your boss monster. And that about ends what was good about the archetype. While the mechanics seemed fun, the playstyle was not explosive and highly linear. The main deck monsters only got their effects on normal summon, and when they lost their material, having to protect themselves, there was no way to get another piece. That was a massive issue during a format where Heavy Storm, and even worse, Breaker were prominent. Monsters are treated as spell traps and placed into the back row. Not only was it easy to remove its poor protection, which was only suitable for protecting in battle, but it also left them with an abysmal stat line in attack and defense. So battle traps and back row removal were their most significant weaknesses, and that even goes for their boss monster, who also had poor attack without an equip card and was a mere force away from being a poor investment. Also, the pickings for the 3 main deck monsters were limited. Not only was a selection of level 3 or lower dragons limited, but there were no good level 3 dragons to use. The best dragon within effect was Twin-Headed Behemoth, and even that was only 1500. But this was still 2300 attack when equipped, which should have been good if not the requirement to get that limited card in the graveyard in the first place. And that the only other good target was Hunter Dragon, a level 3 vanilla with 1700 attack that was made specifically to give Cyberdarks a big target. Cyberdark Dragon wasn't any different either. All that investment for a 1000 attack monster that can only grab 1 dragon had the same mediocre protection as its smaller counterpart. Let's also not forget that there weren't many options to search fusion spells, including the in-archetype fusion spell. Fusion summoning was already a pain when you needed specific materials listed to make said fusion monster, and Cyberdark didn't make that any easier. Add the fact that there was no other spell trap card supports besides Impact, no searchers, no extenders, and laughably, not even good dragons for them to utilize, and you have the peak prowess of what makes an archetype terrible. As you can imagine, the deck saw no play and put up mediocre results. What do you expect from an archetype focusing on clunky equip effects, mediocre protection, and running monsters outside its archetype to make inconsistencies? This was an auto-matic way to get shelled for a while, and by a while, we mean over 11 years gaining dust. Other machine archetypes would make their names known, hilariously including Cyberdragon, who were seeing good results with excellent board presence and powerful options like Cyberdragon Infinity at their disposal. It wouldn't be until 2017 that we saw some support that addressed the issues Cyberdarks came with. To our surprise, the cards were considerably great support to use around our subpar machine dragons. In the TCG set Legendary Duelists, 4 new cards were made to fix the problems that ensued with Cyberdarks. Cyberdark Cannon and Cyberdark Claw were 2 new main deck monsters. Unlike our first Cyber Bunch, these 2 were dragon-type monsters with 1600 attack and 800 defense, and if they're sent to the graveyard while equipped to a monster, they get specific effects. Cyberdark Cannon lets you draw a card, and Cyberdark Claw lets you target a Cyberdark monster in your graveyard and add it to your hand. They even had 2 additional effects, one discard effect and one steering damage calculation. Cannon lets you discard it from your hand to add a Cyberdark monster from your deck to your hand. And during damage calculation, when a monster equipped with it battles, you can send a monster from your deck to the graveyard. Claw on discard lets you add a Cyberdark spell or trap from your deck to your hand. And during damage calculation, when the monster is equipped with battles, you can send a monster from your extra deck to the graveyard. There was also a new head honcho in town in the form of Cyberdarkness Dragon. This retrain of the OG was a dark machine that needed to be fusion summoned first by using 5 Cyberdark effect monsters. When special summoned, you can equip 1 dragon or machine monster from your graveyard to this card, and it gains attack equal to the original attack of the monster equipped by the effect. When an opponent's monster or effect is activated, you can send 1 equipped card to the graveyard to negate and destroy that card. The 2 new main deck monsters seemingly fix many of Cyberdark's issues. They gave Cyberdark searchers for their monsters, spells, and trap cards, dragon monsters for them to target in the graveyard without having to use extra resources to place them there in the first place, and additional effects that help them set up the graveyard with resources for the Cyberdark machines to use. Both also had a chance of causing degenerate plays due to their effects allowing you to send any monster to the graveyard. Cannon could send a simple battle phase protection like Bacon Saver, or an extremely powerful card like Dragon Buster. Claw had a leg up, however. Its effect lets you access your extra deck for additional resources. Around the late 2010s, the extra deck became more than just a place to special summon Xyz, Synchros, and Fusions. It was also a place to utilize resources due to cards gaining effect when sent to the graveyard. Most didn't require activating their effects from the field to the graveyard, so you can send more than just high-level dragons, like 5-headed dragon to the grave, but you also had access to extract bombs if needed. Need field removal? Elder Entity Natis is at your beckon. Need a fusion spell? Send a Rafflesia. Randomly want a shooting star dragon for whatever reason? Send a shooting quasar dragon so you can later equip it with your Cyberdark fusions to make its effect alive. Speaking of Cyberdark machines, can we acknowledge how much of a step up Cyberdarkness Dragon was to Cyberdark Dragon? While it wasn't anything too crazy, it was a complete step up from the former Cyberdark Impact Star, as it came with a higher attack power and an Omni-Negate effect that just requires you to send 1 equip card you control to negate and destroy a card, regardless of what monster has it. So you can use the other Cyberdark monsters with equip cards to activate this card's effect. Finally, what else can you do to fix an archetype other than slap some solid effects onto a field spell card? Cyberdark Inferno was a field spell that prevented your Cyberdark effect monsters from being destroyed or targeted by your opponent's card effects. You can target and return 1 Cyberdark monster on your field to your hand to immediately normal summon a Cyberdark monster. This also lets you grab a polymerization or a fusion spell from your deck to your hand if your opponent destroys this card. Now, you can recycle the Cyberdark machines you use back into your hand to reuse their effects. This added great protection on top of Cyberdark Porous' battle protection. So Cyberdark had gotten great main deck monsters, a solid boss monster, and a field spell that helped address the horrendous trigger effects and gave better protection. It's too bad that the main deck Cyberdark monsters were still awful and lackluster. The deck also had problems making their boss monster, as the deck was slow and didn't have many special summon effects. In this case, none at all, unless by fusion summoning. Even that was a struggle because of the high requirement of materials needed to fusion summon, and the fact that there was no built-in fusion card for the archetype. Remember, Cyberdark Impact could only summon the original Cyberdark Dragon, meaning you had to use regular ones. Even though there were good options like Polymerization and Overload Fusion, you couldn't search them directly from your own volition. The field spell could do it, but it would have to be destroyed by your opponent. So even though the cards addressed glaring weaknesses, it didn't help that these cards were made awful. However, that doesn't mean Konami wouldn't stop branding support for a horrible archetype, as the deck got even more support in the TCG structure deck, Cyberstrike. Cyberstrike aimed to make the whole Cyber network a cohesive, playable unit. That included trying to make Cyberdarks more consistent with more support to cover their flaws. Who needs retrains when you can just throw cards around them? Though it was meant to make the Cyber Dragon and their sub-archetype flop work together, some clear cards favored the Cyberdark aspect. Cyberdark Chimera kicks off this list. It was a level 4 machine with 800 attack and 2100 defense. You could discard 1 spell or trap to add 1 power bond from your deck to your hand, but you could only use dragon or machine cyber monsters as fusion materials on that turn. You could also fusion summon by banishing monsters from your graveyard as materials. If this card is sent to the graveyard, you can send a Cyberdark monster from your deck to the graveyard with a different name from the Cyberdark monsters in your graveyard already. Attachment Cybern was a level 3 light dragon that lets you target 1 cyber monster and equip this monster with it. That monster gains a huge 600 attack for all its hard work. If this equipped card is sent to the graveyard, you can target 1 other dragon or machine cyber monster in your graveyard and special summon it. There was also yet another new boss in town. Cyberdark and Dragon was a fusion monster with 5000 attack and 3800 defense, which could be made by fusing a Cyberdark Dragon plus Cyber and Dragon, or by tributing a Cyberdark fusion monster equipped with a Cyber and Dragon. The card was unaffected by your opponent's activated card effects, and once per turn, you could target one monster in either graveyard and equip it. It was also allowed to make any number of attacks during the battle phase equal to the number of cards equipped to it. For spells, a Cybernetic Horizon was a normal spell card which was always treated as a Cyberdark card. You could send 2 machine and or dragon cyber monsters with different attributes to the graveyard, one from your hand and one from your deck. Then add 1 cyber machine or dragon monster from your deck to your hand. And if you do, send a cyber fusion monster from your extra deck to the graveyard. Your extra deck is also locked into machine monsters when you activate it. Cyberdark Realm was a continuous spell card that, on activation, adds a Cyberdark monster from your deck to your hand with a different name than the other cards in your graveyard. During the main phase, you can normal summon 1 Cyberdark monster in addition to your normal summoner set. In addition to those effects, if you equip a monster from your graveyard with the use of a Cyberdark monster, you can equip cards from your opponent's graveyard instead. Finally, Cyberdark Invasion was their continuous trap card, with 2 once per turn effects. The first one lets you target a Cyberdark effect monster and equip a dragon or machine monster to it as an equipped card in either player's graveyard. The second effect allows you to send 1 equipped card on a machine monster to the graveyard to destroy 1 card your opponent controls. Cybernetic Horizon and Cyberdark Realm were ridiculous add-ons to the archetype. Horizon sets up your graveyard to search for more monsters from your deck. In addition, it begins to set up for your Cyber Fusion monsters by putting an extra deck Cyber in the graveyard so you can later equip it to your Cyberdark Fusions. Cyberdark Realm was a great searcher and granted another normal summon, further helping the deck establish board presence. Chimera straight up gave you Power Bond as a free card, making fusion summoning even easier if you have the materials, and Cyberdark and Dragon was an absolute unit, maxing out at a whopping 5,000 attack, being unaffected by activated effects by your opponent, and being an OTK enabler even with just 1 equipped monster. However, that didn't change the deck's problem with the 3 originals still being dog water. Being heavily reliant on normal summons made it easy to interrupt the deck with hand traps, and the setup for the Cyberdark fusion spells still took 2 turns in almost every scenario. What makes this even more upsetting is that the deck relied on its OTK to end the game, as it was terrible in the grind game due to the lack of negations and interruptions the deck had outside of its trap. The main issue throughout all of it was the fact that all of these amazing cards and effects were used to supplement 3 awful cards that, no matter how you put it, didn't advance the deck's gameplay, and were ultimately just level 4 bricks that had to be played due to their names. The cards offered nothing with their own effects, and by 2021 were nothing more than an outdated trio players were forced to run. There's just no way else to say it. Cyberdarks were a huge letdown compared to what we saw on TV. The excellent aesthetics of these monsters are offset by terrible mechanics and outdated gameplay. Konami's late effort to make them synergize with Cyber Dragons with the structure deck was met with the expected results of just playing Cyber Dragons by themselves. While many can say the deck got terrific support, it just can't get around the fact that Horn, Edge, and Keel did more harm than good to the deck. Their effects didn't bring anything worthwhile. Their protection was barely, well, protection, and they were bricks you had to play due to certain cards in your deck requiring you to play different Cyberdark named monsters. The deck was also easy to interrupt, as simply interrupting the normal summon effect or removing the field spell made the deck fragile. It was dependent on a fusion monster created in OTK, but was so slow it couldn't make it on its first turn most of the time. How any deck that is an OTK is unable to make its boss monster on the first turn is supposed to be consistent is anyone's guess. However, the deck could splash syntax like Dragon Buster and utilize the extra deck for resources and removal, but that wasn't enough to compensate for the inconsistencies of the deck, and the most success it had was being run as the mini engine for Axis Sisters. So until the retrains come for Horn, Edge, and Keel, more ways for the deck to make better boards through interruptions, and faster options are given to the deck, it's safe to say that Cyberdarks belong in the dark. These machines will need much more from their cybernetic network to be viable, or at least casual in any format. How do you fail in Duel Links with 2 skills dedicated to you? Enough of the bashing, off to the scrapyard with these cards, and Cyberdark is one of our newest inductees to the Hall of Fail.